Welcome Chosen X. You awake to a sound that feels older than memory, an undercurrent threaded through the air like a distant bell. The chamber around you is neither familiar nor foreign, it rests at the edge of recognition, an architecture shaped by moments you barely recall. Your breath arrives heavy and deliberate as if the world is asking you to slow down enough to listen. The hush here is not absence but invitation. At first you resist the stillness because habit taught you that silence is a gap to be filled. Then a subtler logic begins to unspool. Silence can teach you a grammar of attention. You set down the instruments you once used to prove yourself and feel the fabric of expectation loosen. Masks that clung so tightly to your features become weightless ornaments slipping away. You move through the room as if it were a map of your own interior, corridors marked by old promises and abandoned projects, alcoves where joy once hid. Light finds the cracks in the plaster and lays a pattern across your skin. Each pool of illumination is an invitation to remember an unhurried truth. The rhythm of ordinary time seems to reconfigure itself, not stopping but bending toward a depth. Solitude arrives as both a test and a teacher. It does not flatter you, it sharpens. You are asked to attend to what vibrates beneath your habitual responses. Under doubt and defensiveness there are small, clear shapes, instincts that have been softened by years of compromise, desires that never learned how to ask without apology, grief that prefers to wait. You hold them without resolving them. In doing so, you make space for them to articulate themselves. There is work to be done that cannot be outsourced. No voice outside this room can do for you what this room is asking. You are being invited into a practice of presence. This practice is not glamorous. It is patient, repetitive, and exacting. It teaches you how to witness without editing, how to be present without fixing. From inside this discipline, a new clarity begins to emerge. Images arrive as visitors, a shuttered window that opens, an old key warming in your palm, a vine pushing through stone. None of them are literal, they are patterns that point. You are learning a language that names what was previously sensed only as pressure. Each symbol loosens the grip of a narrative that has kept you small. Gradually, a different narrative takes shape, not louder, but truer to the architecture of your heart. You confront residues of allegiance. Those voices that insisted on safety above all else come forward, their arguments filigreed with practicality. You hear the voice that equates productivity with worth. You notice the one that taught you to perform even when your spirit was empty. Naming them takes power from them. Naming them allows you to choose otherwise. Fear appears not as a roar but as a thin thread tightening around your chest. You follow it and discover it leads to a memory you never fully honored. There is an unspoken apology waiting there for yourself. You offer it slowly and without expectation. The apology needs no audience. It simply needs acknowledgement. When given this witness, it settles into the shelf of your history and loses its ability to seize the present. Pain arrives as texture rather than headline. You do not flee from it. You trace its edges with a careful curiosity. In the tracing, it yields lessons about your limits and your tenderness. Each lesson is small but cumulative. Over time, you feel a kind of tempering take place, as if your inner metal were annealed rather than shattered. The change is microscopic at first and then unmistakable. Along the way, a presence makes itself known not as command but as a quiet reliability. It speaks fewer words and offers a steadier space. Its vocabulary is simple: attention, kindness, steadiness. These terms are not abstract doctrines. They become tools you practice within the dark. You find that when you deploy them, the room changes. Edges soften. The air holds less charge. Your posture shifts from defense to receptivity. By the time the first cycle of night and day completes, you notice a modest but important alteration. The small obsessions that used to steal your notice no longer have the same gravity. Your attention is not weaker, it is redistributed toward what supports sustained life. You are still the person who loved certain comforts, but those comforts no longer define the center of your orbit. A new center is forming from slow accumulations of attention. This opening section concludes not with resolution but with permission. You are allowed to be unfinished. You are allowed to attend. You are allowed to suffer and to listen at the same time. The summons that brought you here are patient. It will ask more of you, but it will not sell you illusions. For now, your task is simple and relentless: remain, observe, and answer only when your voice is born from witnessing rather than fear. Stay. Remain. Breathe. You step from the slow room into a passage that breathes with quiet motion. The air holds folded narratives like letters long unopened. Doors line the walls, each tagged by a feeling you recognize at the edge of recall. Your hand hesitates before a handle until the name on the wood clarifies its invitation. A voice that has been interior becomes more articulate here, not insisting but offering options that require attentive choosing. Figures appear at intervals and then soften away. Their faces change with memory and mood. At times they resemble a patient teacher you once needed, at others a stranger whose glance altered a day. They do not trap you with riddles. Their questions function as tools. Which burdens did you inherit that no longer serve function? Which obligations still feel like home? You answer with honest breath and the shapes shift as if relieved by your candor. Difficulty is present but not theatrical. A narrow gauntlet tightens where expectation and recollection press close. Panic can flare and you feel the old muscle memory urging escape. Instead you let fear speak its small syntax so it cannot hide a deeper ledger. Translating the tremor into language reduces its claim on you and the corridor lengthens again. Objects cross your path as gentle punctuation. A bowl that has held hush for seasons. A spool that unwinds into a map whose lines sometimes mislead. A mirror dimmed at the center clears when you stop performing and begin to be curious. Each object requests modest courage. None demands spectacle. Each requires a private bravery suited to the scale of your life. At a threshold you meet someone who is neither mentor nor companion. Their voice is ordinary and their patience considerable. You answer without flourishing. They do not instruct from a height. They shape the atmosphere by refining a phrase until you can use it. Their work is granular. They ask you to list ways compromise has eaten your edges. You record each as if giving lost parts a new address. Naming relocates their authority. As you progress, the outer world knits into your interior like threads in a tapestry. Half-remembered melodies return like birds to a winter branch. An abandoned recipe becomes a practice of attention. A small kindness remembered unfurls into a pattern of reciprocity you had misplaced. These recoveries do not arrive as sudden epiphanies. They arrive stitch by stitch. Approaching a chamber you hear the bell of distant duty. Light is measured in cadence impartial. Here the test is fidelity. You must keep an unsigned promise to yourself by performing a humble ritual with precise motion for an extended span despite boredom and without applause. In repetition you find that fidelity accrues weight. Ordinary acts stitch days into coherence. After this practice you notice some doors close without drama while others remain open. You do not force either outcome. You learn to respect timing. Then a subtle undermining appears. A whisper questions the source of your convictions and offers ease in exchange for surrender. The bargain seduces because it carries the patina of convenience. You trace that whisper to an old strategy that once preserved you and recognize that its power is contextual. You keep walking. The figures you met return occasionally to witness rather than answer. Some bow their heads. Some extend hands. Their attendance reassures that choice echoes among those who shared earlier thresholds. At midpoint the corridor opens into a garden neither fully interior nor exterior. The soil in this place remembers names. Shoots push through with stubborn deliberation. You kneel and learn that tending requires listening more than doing. Your hands coax instead of command. Visible return may lag, but attention deepens into a form gratification cannot replicate. Time here shifts. Patience becomes a cultivated capacity rather than idle waiting. Events stop demanding performance or flight. They ask alignment with rhythm. When the garden blurs at the edges, the corridor divides into similar roads. Each option promises a plausible unfolding. You feel that rightness will not reveal itself from above. Committing will obscure alternatives. You recall a rule learned here: integrity tends toward the route that honors your inner ledger of promises. You choose and the passage narrows with quiet inevitability. A low bell marks the end of this stretch. You pause and discover a small calm you had not expected. The choice did not make the world tidy. It made you steadier. You hold that steadiness like a tool for the days ahead and step forward with the sense that tests will continue but that your capacity to answer has widened. Ahead, a faint resonance suggests a new threshold yet unseen. The sound is not an alarm but a question. It asks if you will carry steadiness into service or keep it closely shelved. You inhale and feel readiness, not certainty. Both are acceptable companions. You step toward that resonance with measured resolve. Yes. You enter a chamber where the ordinary measures of sequence loosen and fold like pages in a well-thumbed book. Time does not simply pass here. It layers. Moments you have lived sit beside moments you might yet live, and each version of an event seems to claim a slightly different truth. The sensation is disorienting at first because it asks you to hold contradictions without collapsing into certainty. You learn a new kind of attention that tolerates multiplicity. Images arrive without preface. A child offers you a bowl of rain, a table bears a letter written in a hand you almost recognize, and a song loops with a line that remains half remembered. None of these are puzzles to be solved by speed. Their meaning accrues when you let them sit on your tongue and taste their tones. Each image refracts some angle of your life back to you in a hue you could not call by name before. There are watchers in the periphery. Their presence is not always friendly. Sometimes they appear as companions who lean close to breathe suggestions. Other times they present like agents who tidy your choices into convenient packages. Their voice is persuasive because it knows the softest parts of you. It offers completion, an edited history that spares aching. You discover that what is offered as comfort can also function as a subtle enclosure. When a watcher invites you to accept a curated memory, you feel the ease of landing onto a story that spares strain. Accepting would save energy and neatly resolve a thread. Refusing requires that you hold the raw tension of incompletion. The choice is small in the moment and enormous in consequence because once you accept a smooth memory it tends to knit itself into your forward motion. A deeper hazard reveals itself. Some observers intend care, others intend custody. Protection and manipulation share a code of similar politeness. Discerning motive becomes a practice that asks for patience more than cleverness. You study patterns rather than promises. Over time you notice how your own language shifts when you are near certain watchers. You begin to hear a familiar cadence returning, one that used to soothe and now subtly reroutes the course of your days. In the middle of the chamber a pool reflects multiple skies. Bending over it you see not a single reflection but a kaleidoscope of selves stacked like translucent panes. One version of you has laughed more readily, another has withheld speech until a clearer hour, another carries the weight of a decision you did not make. Gently, the pool insists you look at each pane and consider the cost of its life. A voice that feels like an old neighbor reads aloud fragments of your possible stories without embellishment. The choice emerges with a clarity that trips like a seam. If you step toward the pane where you acted differently, your present will rearrange to accommodate that choice. It is not metaphysical trickery. It is the literal consequence of realigning your attention to a neglected axis. The thought unsettles you because the decision demands relinquishment of a trace you have come to identify as yourself. You wrestle with a knot of loyalties. Certain claims on your attention were inherited as if by right, handed down because previous hands were too worn to resist. They are not necessarily malignant, but they are sticky. Letting them go risks altering how others perceive you. You test small acts of disentanglement by refusing a standard answer or by speaking a minor truth that had been softened. Each experiment loosens strands. A sudden convergence occurs when sounds from many timelines swell and cohere into a single phrase. It is not a proclamation. Instead it arrives as a question that pierces your private apparatus of excuse. The question names a responsibility that is neither imposed nor flattering. It asks whether you will accept the burden of remembering without folding memory into a tidy justification. Faced with that query, you taste the cost. Some futures demand the patience to witness a slow repair. Others call you into abrupt repair that leaves no room for lament. Your impulse is to avoid both extremes and to hope for an easier route. That hope is merciful in intention but inadequate in outcome. The only sufficient path is one in which you accept incompleteness as a condition of movement. As you stand between versions of your life, you notice something else shifting. The watchers do not always agree. Small fissures appear in their coordination. An observer who had seemed intent on sheltering you now hesitates. Another who shaped narratives for expedience loses appetite for the arrangement. This disagreement reveals that their power is not absolute. They operate through consent as much as capability. A ledger appears on a table, written in a language that looks like both ledger and prayer. It lists debts and gifts in measures that do not reduce currency. Entries are subtle, attentions withheld, consolations given, promises kept in shadow. The ledger invites you to mark where you have been generous and where you have been economical with presence. You trace the lines with a fingertip and a slow understanding takes root. An urgent choice waits at the chamber exit. You can carry a fragment of memorized ease forward, accepting the comfort of curated continuity. Or you can cross into uncertain terrain that will make you responsible for untidy truths and for the people whose lives intersect with those truths. Either route transforms you, one smooths you into a safer shape, the other stretches you into a more demanding alignment with what is raw. The gravity of this selection is quiet rather than spectacular. It arrives without thunder and yet rearranges your center of gravity. You realize that to choose the path of raw memory is to accept loneliness at times, because some people value the tidy account. Yet you also perceive that the other path, the one that preserves curated peace, will eventually constrict the number of ways you can be generous. At the threshold you breathe and make a decision not only for the shape of what will come but for the manner in which you will receive your life. There is no ideal outcome to promise. There is only the integrity of response. You step through and the chamber exhales behind you, closing a pattern of opportunity and sealing a seam of consequence. The world you enter is not simpler. It is more honest. You accept the cost and step forward, trusting truth will widen what you offer. You enter a place where transformation is not announced by trumpet or flag but by the subtle rearrangement of ordinary things. A teacup you once cherished sits on a low table and looks as if it remembers entire conversations you cannot recall. Light moves differently here, not as a visitor but as a patient collaborator, tracing contours you never allowed yourself to study. Your hands, when you lift them, feel less foreign, they are instruments learning new vocabulary. Here the world tests not your endurance but your fidelity to small acts. Rituals are minimal and repetitive yet they refine more than any grand speech. You learn to finish a single page instead of fleeing to many, to fold a shirt with attention rather than speed, to place a question in the open and wait for its answer without inventing one. These laborers are deceptively quiet. They accumulate like sediment until something essential shifts beneath your feet. Memory arrives as a weather pattern. One afternoon memory rains soft silver across your forearms and reveals a shape of shame you have worn like an ill-fitting coat. Instead of tearing it away you examine its seams, tracing the stitch that bound your identity to avoidance. In that examination you find generous margins where repair is possible. Repair does not mean erasure. Repair means alternative architectures for living in the world. A companion of sorts appears, not through speech but through calibrated gestures. They sit across from you at the table, not to narrate your life but to mirror the cadence of your breath. Their presence is an offering of permission to slow. When you match their rhythm you feel how haste had hollowed parts of you. Pace returns as a medicine and with it a new threshold of clarity. Decisions born in this tempered moment hold different gravity. Your body speaks with new honesty. Where you used to swallow small alarms they surface as signals now worth attending. A tension behind the ribs suggests a boundary you have been neglecting. A lightness behind the eyes points to a permission you denied yourself. Listening to these cues requires discipline and tenderness. You practice both. In the practice you begin to honor the boundary between self-preservation and self-sacrifice. Tension loosens when you give voice to an old regret without the aim of explanation. You say the sentence slowly and then stop to allow it to settle into the room. Admission is not a transaction. It is a placement that shifts torque inside your interior geometry. In that shift, other doors unfasten because truth renders certain locks irrelevant. At times the work calls for brutal clarity. You must identify a line where devotion to comfort becomes complicated with your own diminishment. Naming it is urgent even when the consequence is painful. The clarity does not arrive as accusation but as a ledger of facts you cannot ignore. Facts, once transparent, become the basis for new covenants that you negotiate with yourself. Symbols accrete on surfaces. A stone with a worn face becomes an altar for a promise you intend to keep. A thread tied to a branch points to a conversation you plan to have. Each small symbol is less superstition than agreement. They create a landscape where intention can be seen and tested. You learn that visible tokens are not for vanity but for accountability. Resistance appears as polite alternatives. You see ways to perform apparent growth without changing root habits. The temptation is strong because it offers appearance without cost. You decline with steady courtesy. Refusal is not dramatic. It is a daily economy of choice where you refuse to trade depth for a comfortable narrative. A night arrives that feels like a trial though no tribunal sits. You move through it with a lantern of careful attention and you pass without spectacle. In the morning you find that a muscle previously contracted now relaxes. Not all relief is triumphant. Some relief is the subtle unsealing of a chamber that had been bound by fear. By the time you leave this place you have learned the grammar of small loyalties. They are loyal to truth and to the slow patient work of forming a life that can carry light without burning out. You walk out neither perfect nor whole but with a clearer map. The map asks for continued tending, for a generosity not of grand gestures but of consistent presence. You carry that request like a petition you will answer day by day. As you move onward, the knowledge you gathered reshapes how you enter relationships and how you steward obligations. Small practices become the scaffolding for larger courage. Where you once dispersed attention across many claims, you now allocate it with care so that what matters receives tending. This redistribution is not austerity. It is an act of creative fidelity that honors the fragile and the enduring. You step forward with that new allocation and keep walking. You are not finished, but you have learned how to return to yourself and keep going. The wide hush opens like a held breath released. You arrive where currents that feel separate converge into a single responsibility. Here the air is thick with consequence and soft with invitation, asking you to translate motion into meaning rather than rush for result. Your lungs answer with a steadier rhythm and something in your chest eases as if an old knot has begun to give. A lattice of people and small expectations gathers around you without demand. Their faces are ordinary and unadorned, each carrying fragments that want tending more than instruction. They seek companioning and repair. In meeting them you hold a mirror and a lever. The mirror reveals habits that have thinned your capacities. The lever offers a point where your practiced attention can expand repair beyond yourself. A chorus forms, not as a spectacle but as a steady thread. Memories owed to forgotten kindness, soft petitions for courage, and quiet requests to close the gap between wanting and meeting. Your role is to listen, to respond without seeking credit, and to let repair accrue by faithful repetition. Leadership here means tending thresholds and stewarding rooms where grief may be held without performance and joy may arrive unbargained. You find that service is composed of many small acts. You repair a conversational habit so a neighbor can speak. You set a table that holds a person without explanation. You correct a story so a child may recover in a single day. These acts are unglamorous but cumulative. They produce cultures that breathe differently because attention has been redistributed from spectacle to care. Old systems notice this patient economy and offer exchange. They propose translation of depth into show. You will feel tempted because applause soothes the part of you that once needed proof. Resist the quick. Keep soil where the practice takes root. Allies appear who carry steady hands rather than loud claims. With them you form plain covenants, reciprocity, honored boundary, paced labor. These covenants create durability under pressure. As months collect, a widening appears above, an aperture through which light compresses into a clear signal. The signal asks for scaled fidelity, not power. It requests that you carry practices into wider circles so that attention multiplies rather than dissipates. Accepting this shifts your measures. You begin to judge choices by how many breaths they preserve rather than by how bright they make your ledger. Solitude returns as a teacher after public work begins. Withdrawal is not escape but a clearing that supports renewed acuity. Protect those intervals. Teach others how to hold silence without abandoning duty. Periodic stillness keeps the work alive because attention frays without restoration. Honor the rhythm that lets you give without burning your edges. One long season yields a visible effect. Micro-acts become a culture, faithful disciplines cohere into an ecology of care, and a communal voice rises to name practices that sustain life under strain. That voice is practical and plain. It teaches tending, containment, replenishment, and celebration that keeps humility at its center. The torch you carry becomes a tool for formation when shared with careful intention. At a threshold the field offers a portal, a luminous frame of picture and sound. It is not a spectacle but a means to convene practice for wider use. The record inside will gather simple demonstrations, patient stories, and invitations to participate. It will offer practices for attention and for repair in ordinary life. It will not promise perfection. It will ask for participation. If you choose to bring this work into a fuller view, you will risk being seen and misread. You will accept the trade that fidelity publicized can transform more than private devotion. The portal is honest about cost and potential. If the call sits true in your chest, step closer and stand before the opening. The record waits as a continuation, not entertainment. Watch with intent. Subscribe to receive each new convening and turn on alerts so you know when the next practice is shared. The transmission will unfold as a series of short gatherings, clear demonstrations of the practices you have begun, plain testimonies from people who kept steady work, and precise invitations you can try where you sleep, eat, and meet. It will teach how to tend small boundaries that let generosity grow, how to repair a conversation with modest phrases, and how to invent rituals that protect endurance. It will avoid spectacle while mapping usable forms of attention. If this invitation resonates with what has changed inside you, join the convening, subscribe, and turn notifications on now.